Fortnite Chapter 4 is finally here, and I'm going to be giving you my honest reaction and honest opinion of the chapter thus far. For the first time, I actually believe Fortnite has pulled it off in terms of having a good season to start off a chapter. Fortnite is notorious for having very bad starts to each chapter. And to be honest, from a gameplay standpoint, this is how it was looking. Fortunately, they've already taken measures to kind of correct and fix this, and I'll get more into that later. But I want to talk about the great things about this chapter. And number one for me, it has got to be the map. This map is so pretty and visually stunning. It is a stark in comparison to how just visually pleasing the other maps have been in Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. I believe the biomes are great. I believe since the POIs are much smaller, they're more complex, they're more well thought out. There's a lot more to be excited about, a lot more to learn at each POI. And because there's less POIs, there's more fighting, which I believe kind of in my mind is an intentional change to kind of bring a more just viewership interest when people are viewing competitive Fortnite. Now that is clearly speculation. There's no way for me to actually prove that, but there is way less POIs in this chapter overall, but visually, again, it just looks incredibly stunning, and I think it is the biggest W of the entire new chapter. Now, next thing I'm going to talk about I think is really good for the game is the addition of a perk system, or what's called augments, but to me it's just perks. Someone coming from the Call of Duty background, you essentially get a chance to select 4 things if you live long enough that give you kind of tactical advantages, and I think this is a really interesting way to add another wrinkle to Fortnite that previously wasn't there. Now, whether they're super well balanced, that will only take time to tell. I believe there is one where you can see where the next zone is coming. I don't believe that's balanced for competitive. That's fine for pubs, you know, who cares? Whatever's in pubs is in pubs. But for competitive, I don't believe that needs to be a change that occurs. And we'll see how the balancing comes with that. You know, it's a new mechanic, so I'm going to give it a little bit of time, and it just adds kind of more skill to the game, what perks to take in what situation. It can influence your drop, influence what weapons you take. So a really nice and interesting addition to the game. Now, another W that a lot of people may not agree with is the addition of late game arena. Now, late game arena, everyone is kind of complaining or not as satisfied with late game arena due to the fact that it's not like how it was in Chapter 2. We got the same type of end of Chapter 3 type late game where it's kind of creative based and it's incredibly laggy at the beginning. However, late game arena has always been laggy at the beginning. I don't know where there's this misconception that it isn't laggy. It's always laggy to start. Most people just try to key off rip, and that's the problem with it. But for me, I enjoyed the mode a lot. You get into a lot of more fights, and this is, again, I'm going to go more into the reason why I'm enjoying it more than probably maybe most people are, or just because I'm not letting the disappointment just kind of overtake because I'm taking it for what it is. There's a ton of great guns in there. I mean, you have a myriad of different type of shotguns. You have the Striker, you have the Charge, you have the new Maven, you have the new Thunder, you have the Spaz. So there's a lot of shotguns, a lot of versatility. You can still go for clips, which is great for montages. It's actually in game. It's not in creative. It's not cheap. You get that same input delay. Everyone's trying to win, as opposed to in creative. You know, you can really set those up. You can't really set up, you know, clips in game. In my opinion, you know, you're not going to be running into someone you know who they are, and they could just kind of make things look easy for you. So I think this is great overall for that aspect, and it's a great way to get a ton of engagements in. And this kind of goes to my next point, where I think the only bad thing about this season is competitive, unfortunately. And fortunately, they have just released changes that are going to make it a lot better. And that's going to go into my last good point, what I'm really encouraged with, which is communication. But now I'm just going to talk about why is competitive so bad this season. And it just all stems back to, one, I'm going to talk about the balancing issues, the special items or the special weapons that are just kind of ruining it from a competitive standpoint. Obviously, the Excalibur rifle was incredibly not well balanced. It was overpowered. It did so much damage if it hit. It did explosive damage. It did so much structure damage. You could carry 2 of them and fire 2 explosives at the same time. If you're in trios, I mean, that's literally 3 rockets coming at you at a time. If someone carries 2, you know, it's 4. If each is carrying 2, that's 6. It's not counterable, and that's not very good for competitive. And like I said, fortunately, we've already received changes, nerfing, balancing changes. That just came in a couple hours ago, and that's going to be basically why I'm kind of delaying the Fortnite competitive side. There's another update that's going to finalize some more changes, and I go through like all of the updates and stuff in my most recent YouTube short. But if you're interested, just go to my channel, click the shorts page. It's my most recent YouTube short where I go in depth with all the changes that they made for what was kind of making Arena very bad. And the only kind of other con with the gameplay is the lack of materials. Now, there was a bug where you weren't able to farm the brick like you normally are, and they've already talked about fixing that. Again, I go over that in the YouTube short. But again, there isn't very much metal on this map. That's just something the way the map is structured. There's very little POIs that have metal. So for that to happen, you're just going to kind of have adapt, and mats are still kind of an issue in this map. But again, with Arena, the main issues were the bouncing of not only the Excalibur rifle. Let's talk about the hammer. Obviously, it's great for movement. It was also doing a bug where it was damaging players through builds, which was not its intention, and it was incredibly annoying to fight. You get people low, use all your mats, and when you're trying to get a refresh off their mats, they'd hammer 4 times away, and if you don't have one, good luck, you're not chasing them. There's no chance you're going to be able to catch up to them, and they've done some things to address this as well. But again, incredibly annoying and frustrating, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays in tournaments, especially in team modes with rotating, because it's by far the most kind of broken rotation item we've had since the grapple from season 3. It was incredibly strong, and this is kind of how it is now. But I think, again, the last thing that's great about this season is communication. Everyone has been talking about a lot of the issues with the balancing, the Excalibur rifle, with the hammer, with some gameplay stuff, with the materials, and all of those kind of have been addressed already, and we're not even a week into the new chapter, you know? Usually we expect these things to take forever to deal with. We complain we don't get anything kind of fixed that really does need to be fixed. And a lot of this stuff in this chapter really did need to be fixed. Like usually people say just bellyache to bellyache. A lot of this stuff was not very good. A lot of this stuff was very, 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 very annoying, very frustrating to deal with, and honestly not skillful like we're used to. What we hope for in a competitive battle royale. Last season was incredibly skillful. There was not a lot of changes made in the last season. Everything seemed kind of balanced, which is, you know, kind of fresh. And so when the gameplay came out for this chapter, I was really, really disappointed early on. Late game came back and kind of eased my frustration, and I just had to have faith that they were going to make these changes, and they've made a lot of them, which is fantastic. I think they basically took care of every problem that anyone was really complaining about, which was a major issue. But fortunately, again, I think this chapter is great. Honestly, after this update has also lifted my spirits a little bit, because it shows, one, they're listening to the community, which is huge. Kind of reminds me how it was in chapter 1. You know, back then they had that broken P90 that was like an assault rifle but shot like an SMG, and it would just fry everybody, shred everybody, and it didn't even last 24 hours, you know. And we kind of missed that in chapter 3 with the Stinger and the combat never getting touched or nerfed ever, and they were clearly broken. You needed balance changes, and whenever they bounced them, they still weren't that good. They were still broken. You didn't even know that they were nerfed. And now we see some obvious changes. I don't know how they play out, but the fact that they're already attempting them so early is a very encouraging sign. And it makes me hopeful for the rest of the chapter that if anything else arises, it's going to be addressed, which to me is incredibly important. But guys, that is my overall opinion on the chapter. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please drop a like on this video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on post notifications. And I hope I'll be seeing you in the next one. And I also hope I'll be seeing you on Tuesday for my complete competitive breakdown when the new update comes out. But peace.